They strike without warning. Armed, ruthless, and loyal to one name, Brödraskapet Wolfpack. Born behind prison walls and spread across western Sweden, this gang has left a trail of extortion, weapons crimes, kidnappings, and cold-blooded action. From the brutal stabbing at Lindholmen to the execution-style killing in Töreboda, their crimes have shocked the nation. In 1993, Sweden made a significant shift in its correctional system by abolishing the policy of early release at the halfway point of prison sentences. This change was accompanied by much stricter regulations regarding inmates' daily routines, including a tightening of rules for prison leave and other privileges. The reform sparked serious unrest among some of the most violent and unmanageable prisoners, who viewed the new measures as oppressive and responded with open defiance. This resistance led to a rise in tensions and physical confrontations between prison staff and inmates. A particularly extreme incident occurred in the summer of 1994 at Töreboda prison, where violent riots broke out, culminating in inmates setting parts of the facility ablaze. Several of the prisoners who played leading roles in the Töreboda uprising would later go on to form the core of a new and dangerous prison gang. The correctional authorities reacted to these upheavals with harsher tactics. Prolonged solitary confinement, inmate transfers, and delays in parole became standard tools used to suppress dissent. Yet, despite these efforts, a faction of highly aggressive and disruptive prisoners at Kumla prison began to coalesce. By the spring of 1995, they formally established Sweden's first organized prison gang, calling themselves Brödraskapet, the Brotherhood, abbreviated as BSK. The gang's founding figure and first leader was Daniel Fitzpatrick, who had been sentenced to 8 years for a violent armored car robbery committed in Stockholm in 1992. Fitzpatrick was also a suspect in the fatal shooting of a police officer during a separate robbery in Högdalen that same year. BSK quickly grew in notoriety, attracting some of the most infamous and ruthless criminals in the Swedish prison system. Its members were not petty offenders but hardened criminals convicted of serious offenses such as large-scale drug trafficking, armed robbery, murder, attempted murder, especially targeting law enforcement, and other violent acts. To join the gang, inmates were required to meet a strict set of criteria. They had to be incarcerated in one of Sweden's top security prisons and were expected to resist the system by refusing drug tests and participation in rehabilitation programs. Additionally, they had to prove they had never collaborated with authorities. No snitching was tolerated. This code of conduct formed the backbone of the gang's internal structure. The Swedish Prison and Probation Service responded by attempting to neutralize BSK through forced relocations and isolating its members. However, this strategy inadvertently contributed to the gang's expansion. As members were moved between prisons, they carried their ideology and organization with them, spreading the group's influence. By 1996 and 1997, BSK had an estimated 80 to 90 members across various facilities and wielded significant power, not only over fellow inmates but also in intimidating or manipulating prison staff. Reports from law enforcement and prison officials described BSK as being extremely active in continuing their criminal behavior behind bars, primarily involving drug-related activities and acts of violence. Several murders that occurred during the 1990s at both Kumla and Töreboda prisons were linked directly to the Brotherhood. Toward the end of 1995, a major development occurred when several recently released BSK members joined forces with the criminal motorcycle gang ASAMC in Stockholm. This collaboration led to the formation of the first BSK chapter outside the prison walls, organized as an outlaw biker gang and headquartered in Lana, in southern Stockholm. Known as BSK-MC, this branch of the organization consisted of roughly 15 to 20 individuals and made a strong impact on the Stockholm criminal underworld between 1995 and 1998. As the BSK-MC grew, its membership was no longer limited to ex-inmates. The gang began to recruit people from outside the prison system, leading to a clear division of status between members. To address this, inmates inside the prison started using the term Wolfpack to differentiate themselves from their counterparts on the outside who had never served time. During the years 1996 to 1998, several members of Brödraskapet in Stockholm were arrested and convicted for a variety of serious crimes, including extortion, illegal weapons possession, and kidnapping. In January 1998, Daniel Fitzpatrick was released from Hall Prison. However, his release was anything but peaceful. At a party celebrating his return to freedom, a person was shot in the leg, and another was struck in the head with an axe. Just a few months later, on June 18, 1998, Daniel Fitzpatrick was gunned down while sitting in his car. The motives behind the killing remain unclear to this day. Eventually, two individuals with ties to a different criminal gang were convicted of aiding and abetting the murder. Following Fitzpatrick's assassination, BSK's motorcycle chapter disbanded. However, the gang's operations within the prison system continued without interruption. A new leader, or president, was elected to take over the organization. During the fall of 1998, new BSK chapters began to form outside of prison once more, this time in cities like Gothenburg and Västerås. These new groups abandoned the motorcycle gang model and operated more like street-level criminal organizations. The new president had a past connected to the skinhead scene but, as far as authorities could tell, had never been affiliated with any other formal organization. He began recruiting others with similar backgrounds into a hang-around division based in Västerås. However, the tenure of Brödraskapet's second president proved to be brief and turbulent. He ended up behind bars toward the end of 1999 and officially cut ties with the organization in August of the following year. His departure paved the way for another prominent and heavily criminalized member from Gothenburg, someone who had been affiliated with the Brotherhood since its founding in 1995. This individual stepped into the leadership role, guiding the national organization between 2000 and 2002, and later remained at the helm of the Gothenburg chapter until 2006. During the years 1999 and 2000, Brödraskapet intensified its recruitment efforts in the Gothenburg region, drawing in numerous hardened criminals and establishing a powerful base of operations along Sweden's western coast. In the spring of 2001, tensions flared up within the gang itself, leading to internal discord. Around the beginning of summer, a recently released member from the Västerås chapter mysteriously vanished, and the police quickly suspected foul play, believing he had been murdered. These suspicions were reinforced after a dramatic meeting held in July 2001, during which the then vice president of the Gothenburg faction and two fully initiated members were formally expelled from the group. By late August, two of those expelled individuals disappeared without a trace. The grim truth was uncovered in spring 2002 when their murdered and buried bodies were discovered in a gravel pit. In September of the same year, approximately 10 prospects and hang-arounds from the Gothenburg chapter were also removed from the organization, likely because they had chosen to support the wrong side during the factional strife. Despite these internal purges and violent events, Brödraskapet's presence outside prison walls continued to grow. In 2002, the organization expanded further by establishing new operational branches in Helsingborg and Kristianstad. Alongside these new chapters, the gang also launched a support structure known as BSK Support, which acted as a secondary network. These support groups sprang up in several cities, including Gothenburg, Västerås, Helsingborg, Kristianstad, Uddevalla, and Katrineholm. Recruitment for the support group even began inside prisons, allowing the organization to deepen its roots both behind bars and in the outside world. Police estimates from 2002 to 2003 indicated that the gang's total membership ranged between 60 and 70 individuals. Strikingly, nearly two-thirds of these members were not incarcerated, a rare situation for a group that had been primarily prison-based. Toward the end of 2002, the Brotherhood established a special unit called National, designed to act as the central authority within the organization, responsible for making high-level strategic decisions that would guide the gang's nationwide operations. The president of this national division came from the Västerås chapter, the vice president was drawn from Helsingborg, and a key member from Gothenburg took on the role of sergeant-at-arms. By 2003, Brödraskapet was extremely active, especially in the regions of Gothenburg and Skane. Notably, though, only a small number of its members were imprisoned that year, a surprising statistic given their criminal records and continued activity. However, this relative freedom was not to last. Law enforcement authorities in the vast Reorganization region intensified their efforts against the Brotherhood, launching a series of coordinated crackdowns. Throughout 2004, approximately 20 members from various parts of the country were arrested, remanded, and eventually convicted on charges ranging from serious drug offenses to aggravated assault and unlawful deprivation of liberty. By the fall of that year, only a handful of active members from the Gothenburg chapter remained free. Nevertheless, in hindsight, it became clear that the group's structure and overall activity were not as deeply shaken as initially assumed. While their external criminal operations slowed for a time, Brödraskapet's ability to draw in new recruits did not falter. In fact, recruitment efforts intensified in the years that followed, largely due to the growing number of imprisoned members who kept the organization alive from within the walls. At its core, Brödraskapet remained a prison-based gang, and its members demonstrated a high level of adaptability when it came to reorganizing or creating new branches in response to shifting circumstances. In 2005, Brödraskapet found itself embroiled in a fierce conflict with another unnamed criminal group. The rivalry escalated into a wave of violent confrontations, especially inside prisons, where the two factions attacked one another in a series of brutal incidents. During this volatile period, Brödraskapet appeared to be regaining some of its lost influence within the prison system, even as its activities on the outside slowed. Toward the end of 2005, Brödraskapet once again found itself shaken by an internal power struggle that significantly disrupted the gang's hierarchy and structure. This conflict culminated in the expulsion of the national chapter's vice president, one of the organization's top-ranking figures at the time. As a direct consequence, the Helsingborg chapter, previously an important component of the Brotherhood's regional network, was completely dismantled. The following year, 2006, saw the release of several imprisoned members, which reignited the gang's criminal operations, particularly across Sweden's west coast and in the Skåne region. With fresh blood returning to the streets, Brödraskapet resumed its violent and illicit activities with renewed energy. In Gothenburg, 2 BSK members were involved in a savage assault on another man tied to the criminal underworld. The beating was so vicious that the victim permanently lost sight in one of his eyes. Meanwhile, in Kristianstad, a supporter of the gang suffered a gruesome punishment that involved having his ear cut off, an act widely believed to have been part of an internal settling of scores. Throughout 2006, members of Brödraskapet were involved in a series of high-profile criminal incidents that led to multiple convictions, including for extortion, aggravated assault, and robbery. One particularly tragic event occurred when a BSK member from Kristianstad was shot and killed while sitting in a car in Malmö. Police investigations suggested the shooting might have been accidental, and a known associate of the victim was later sentenced to a short prison term in connection with the incident. In September 2006, during the gang's annual general meeting, a major shift in leadership policy was recorded. According to internal documentation from that meeting, a decision was made that the current president would step down from his position. Furthermore, the organization agreed to eliminate all formal leadership titles such as president, vice president, and similar ranks. What replaced this structure, or how the organization has been managed since, remains unclear, as information about the gang's internal operations has grown increasingly opaque. The year 2007 began with a shocking and brutal incident that highlighted the volatility and ruthlessness of Brödraskapet's world. During a party held at the gang's headquarters in Gothenburg, a former member of another criminal organization was murdered. The cause of this killing, according to speculation, was trivial but deadly, a disparaging comment made by the victim regarding a tattoo belonging to a BSK member. In the aftermath, several individuals connected to Brödraskapet were detained. Eventually, one full member and one supporter were formally convicted for their involvement in the homicide. As summer turned into fall, the release of multiple members from prison breathed new life into the gang's operations. Their activities, especially in Gothenburg and across Skåne, surged once again, reflecting the organization's cyclical pattern of decline and resurgence tied to member availability. Between 2007 and 2009, Swedish law enforcement continued to target Brödraskapet with increasing urgency, and several members found themselves behind bars again due to serious crimes. Notably, the former president of the Gothenburg chapter was sentenced to a lengthy term for his involvement in significant narcotics-related offenses. Despite these legal setbacks, Brödraskapet continued to maintain a visible and active presence in several key regions. By 2009, the organization had established fully functioning chapters in Gothenburg, Västerås, and Kristianstad. Additionally, it maintained a network of supporters in western Sweden, including a notable presence in Uddevalla and a smaller group based in Borås. Extortion, illegal weapons possession, kidnapping, and murder are just some of the serious crimes linked to the feared criminal group Brödraskapet Wolfpack, particularly in western Sweden, where their presence has been both persistent and disturbing. Over the years, this notorious gang has been associated with numerous high-profile and violent offenses in the city of Gothenburg and surrounding regions. Originally born behind bars in the high-security Kumla prison, the group gradually extended its reach far beyond the prison system and developed strong connections with the outlaw motorcycle gang scene. The gang's evolution from a prison-born brotherhood to a widespread criminal syndicate has been marked by violence, brutality, and a firm grip on loyalty and control. One particularly chilling case took place in December 2019. A woman had just gotten off a bus in the Lindholmen district of Gothenburg when she was suddenly ambushed by a man carrying a knife. He came up behind her, wrapped his arm around her, and then repeatedly stabbed her in a horrifying assault before fleeing the scene. Though she miraculously survived the attack, she sustained severe and life-altering injuries. Not long after this horrific event, the perpetrator joined the Wolf Tribe, a support group affiliated with Brödraskapet Wolfpack. He would later be sentenced to 8 years in prison for attempted murder. The name Brödraskapet, later expanded with the Wolfpack designation, rose to national notoriety during the latter half of the 1990s and into the early 2000s. It all began inside the notorious Kumla bunker in 1995, but it didn't take long before the gang started expanding beyond the prison system into the streets. Members of the organization became synonymous with serious and often brutal criminal behavior, including but not limited to extortion, violent assault, and even targeted killings. The gang's first leader, Daniel Fitzpatrick, was gunned down in a drive-by shooting in 1998 while sitting inside his car, just months after being released from prison. That act of violence was just the beginning. In 2001, 2 former members of the organization were beaten to death at a Hells Angels clubhouse in the Gunnels area of Gothenburg. Their bodies were later discovered buried in a gravel pit. Then in 2007, a powerful bomb exploded near the home of prosecutor Barbro Johnson in Trollhättan. Johnson had previously brought charges against several members of Brödraskapet, and 2 individuals with known connections to the gang were ultimately convicted for carrying out the attack. Though some may consider Brödraskapet Wolfpack a remnant of Sweden's criminal past, court records and recent criminal proceedings suggest otherwise. New cases continue to emerge, painting a picture of a gang that is still deeply involved in organized crime. Charges have included drug trafficking, weapons offenses, violent robbery, and kidnapping. In one recent incident, 2 men were put on trial for abducting another man in the town of Lilla Edet, allegedly attempting to extort 150,000 kronor from him. During the confrontation, one of the accused men reportedly threatened the victim by stating, "Do you know who I am? I'm from Brödraskapet." Another troubling incident unfolded in central Uddevalla at the beginning of the year. A man suspected of drug dealing was apprehended by police, and during the arrest, a loaded firearm fell out of his clothing. At the time, he was wearing a vest emblazoned with the Wolfpack logo. When questioned by the police, he offered minimal cooperation. Asked about the 43,000 kronor found in his possession, he gave no explanation. When asked about his role in Brödraskapet Wolfpack, he refused to comment. Even when investigators brought up the werewolf patch sewn onto his vest, reportedly an emblem awarded to those who have committed murder on behalf of the gang, he remained silent. Among the most heinous crimes linked to the group in recent years was a cold-blooded killing that occurred in Töreboda in 2018. The victim was shot dead, and his body was later discovered dumped beside a manure pit. The perpetrator, Bruno Holmdahl, was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the murder. At the time of the killing, Holmdahl had been actively working to set up a new Wolfpack chapter in the Skaraborg area, where he intended to assume the position of vice president. This plan came to light after police intercepted and monitored his communications through covert surveillance. The establishment of the new chapter was ultimately never realized. The Swedish police in Region West have compiled a detailed assessment of both Wolfpack and its affiliated support group Wolf Tribe. Authorities classify them as a network of individuals engaged in organized criminal activity that meets the criteria for organized crime as defined by the European Union. According to law enforcement, the gang is structured similarly to international biker gangs such as the Hells Angels and Bandidos. Recruits typically begin as hangarounds, then advance to prospect status, and eventually, if deemed loyal and useful enough, become full-fledged members. Police note that total and unwavering loyalty to the club and its members is mandatory. This includes not only active participation in criminal operations but also supporting and standing behind violent or illegal acts carried out by other members or in the gang's name. The Brotherhood demands unity, silence, and obedience. As of now, authorities believe that there are 2 active Brödraskapet Wolfpack chapters still operating in western Sweden, one in northern Gothenburg and the other in Uddevalla. Exiting the organization is no simple matter and is strictly categorized. One can leave under the status of left, which means the individual remains on good terms with the gang. Another option is out, which suggests the person has unresolved obligations to the club and is expected to make amends before severing ties completely. The most dangerous and stigmatized exit is labeled out no contact. Individuals given this status are fined, actively hunted, and marked for retribution. Any current member who sees such a person is obligated to attack them on sight, making it clear that disloyalty is not tolerated and betrayal carries deadly consequences.